Welcome back. Thanks for being here tonight. We have 3 stories lined up for you. We'll hear from Felicia Marquez about a narrow escape from a serial killer, Robert Mclay regarding a strange night shift at a train station, and Ben Dover, who uncovered a deadly plot just by reading the wrong lips. Let's begin with Felicia. This story is brought to you by Felicia Marquez. This happened in September of 2021. I was driving back from my buddy Dave's place outside of Harlan County, Kentucky, deep in the eastern part of the state where the roads don't have names, just numbers, and the trees press in so close on both sides that your headlights barely do anything past 20 feet. I was 29 at the time, not a nervous guy by nature. I'd driven that stretch of Route 221 a dozen times, usually in daylight, but I'd stayed later than I meant to, and it was pushing midnight by the time I got on the road. My truck, a 2014 Tacoma with about 140,000 miles on it, had been making a low grinding noise from the front end for about a week. I'd been meaning to get it looked at. I hadn't gotten it looked at. The plan was simple. 45 minutes through the hills, back to my apartment in Harlan proper, beer in hand by 12:30. That was the plan. About 15 miles into the drive, I passed a gas station, the only one for the next stretch, and I noticed a flyer taped to the pump, hand-printed, black marker on white paper. I only caught it for a second in my headlights as I rolled past without stopping, but I could make out 3 words. Missing. And below that, armed and dangerous. I thought it was probably a lost dog flyer. Told myself that. I don't know why I told myself that. The print was too large for a lost dog flyer. I kept driving. About 8 miles further in, the grinding from the front end got worse. I felt it first, a shudder through the steering wheel, and then I heard it, a deep, rhythmic clunking that shook the cab every time I hit a curve. I slowed down. The clunking slowed with me, then stopped completely. Then the brake pedal went soft. I pumped it once, twice. The truck started pulling right. I got it to the shoulder, more of a gravel runoff than an actual shoulder, and rolled to a stop with my hazards on. There was nothing around me. No houses, no driveways, no lights. Just black tree line on both sides and a ribbon of cracked asphalt disappearing in both directions. I got out and crouched in front of the driver's side tire. I couldn't see much in the dark, but I could feel it. The wheel was hot. Not warm, hot. And there was something wet on the inside of the rim that I figured was brake fluid. My phone had 1 bar of service. I called Dave. It went to voicemail. I called the road service number on my insurance card. The automated system said the estimated wait was 42 minutes. I got back in the truck, locked the doors, and sat there with my hazards blinking orange against the dark. I'd been there maybe 10 minutes when I saw the light. It was a flashlight, I think, or a lantern. It was coming from the tree line on the left side of the road, about 200 feet back in the direction I'd come from. Just a pale, moving point of light, weaving between the trunks. Slow. No hurry to it. Like whoever was carrying it was out for an evening walk. I told myself it was a hunter. Plenty of people hunt those hills at night. Illegal, but common. I watched the light move for a minute, and then it stopped. It just stopped, stayed in one place, about 50 yards off the road. And then it started moving again, toward the road. I turned off my hazards. I don't know why I did that. I just did it without thinking. Something in me didn't want to be seen. The light reached the road. I could see the shape of a man now. Tall, heavy coat, moving with this slow, deliberate walk. He didn't look up and down the road the way you would if you were just crossing. He turned and looked directly at my truck. I slid down in the seat. I could see him through the bottom inch of the driver's side window. He was standing at the center line, just standing there, looking at my truck. He took a step toward me. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I kept my voice as low as I could. I told the dispatcher my location, told her my truck had broken down on Route 221, told her there was a man outside. She asked me if I was in immediate danger. I said I didn't know. She told me to stay on the line and stay in the vehicle. I heard his footsteps then, gravel crunching, slow and unhurried, moving along the passenger side of the truck. The footsteps stopped. I stopped breathing. There was a sound at the passenger door, a small metallic sound, like something being pressed against the handle. Then a pause. Then the handle lifted. The door held, locked. I heard him move around to the rear of the truck. I heard something drag along the tailgate, a tool or a stick or something I couldn't place. Just a long, slow scrape of metal on metal. Then nothing. 30 seconds of nothing. The rear window shattered. I don't know what he used. A rock, maybe. The safety glass caved in but held in its frame, and the sound was enormous in the dark. I lunged for the door handle. I was out of the truck before I knew I was moving. I ran. Not toward him. Along the road, back the way I'd come. I didn't have the phone anymore. I dropped it when I bolted. The gravel was uneven under my feet, and I went down hard on one knee, got up, kept running. I heard him behind me. Not running, walking. That same slow walk. Like he wasn't worried about catching me. Like he knew something I didn't. That was almost worse than if he'd sprinted. I ran until my lungs felt like they were tearing, and I kept looking back. And every time I looked back, I could see the light swinging through the dark behind me, unhurried. And I thought about that flyer on the gas station pump and the word dangerous in black marker, and I just kept running. I made it back to that gas station. The lights were off, closed, but there was a dumpster around the side, and I got behind it and crouched down, and I sat there in the dark with my hands over my mouth so he wouldn't hear me breathing. I don't know how long I stayed there. A long time. Long enough that the feeling in my knee came back as pain instead of adrenaline. The light never came around the corner. A county sheriff's deputy found me at that gas station at about 2 a.m. He'd been dispatched from my 911 call before I dropped the phone. He said a second unit had gone to my truck. I asked him what they found. He was quiet for a second. Then he told me they'd picked up a man on foot about a mile west of my truck. He was on the FBI's radar. They'd been tracking him across 3 counties for 11 days. The deputy said he had zip ties in his coat pocket. He said there were other things too, but he didn't go into specifics. He also told me the man had been moving parallel to me through the tree line for almost the entire 8 miles between that gas station and where my truck broke down. He'd been out there the whole time, watching my headlights from the woods, waiting to see where I'd stop. I still don't know what would have happened if my truck hadn't broken down right there, right in that specific spot close enough to the gas station that I could actually run for it. If it had given out half a mile deeper in, I don't think I'd have made it. I traded the Tacoma in the following month. I bought something with newer brakes. I still don't drive alone at night.
Whew, that was entirely too close for comfort.
Up next, a story from Robert Mclay. This story is brought to you by Robert Mclay. Back in the spring of 2022, I was working the overnight shift at Dunmore Central Station, a small commuter rail hub in western Pennsylvania, about 40 minutes outside Pittsburgh. Not a glamorous job. I was a platform attendant, which basically meant I walked the platforms, checked the waiting area, and made sure nobody was sleeping on the benches past midnight. The last scheduled train came through at 11:47 p.m. After that, the station was mine until 6 a.m. when the first morning crew arrived. It was a quiet job. That was the thing I told my wife when I took it. It's just 6 hours of walking around an empty building, I said. Easy money. She thought the overnight hours were a bad idea, but we needed the income, and I figured I could handle some solitude. For the first 3 months, I could. The station itself was old, built in the 1940s, all green tile and wooden benches and fluorescent lights that buzzed at a pitch that took some getting used to. There were 4 platforms. Platform 1 and 2 were active. Platform 3 was used occasionally for freight delays. Platform 4 had been decommissioned for years, closed off behind a chain-link gate with a padlock. The track beyond it was supposedly not in service. I'd walked past it hundreds of times without giving it a second thought. The night it happened was a Tuesday in late March. It had been raining all day, one of those cold, flat Pennsylvania rains that makes everything smell like wet concrete. My shift started at midnight. I did my usual check of the waiting room, the bathrooms, the ticket booths. Everything locked. Everything quiet. I made a cup of coffee from the machine in the break room and started my first platform walk around 12:30. That's when I saw the man. He was standing near the gate to platform 4, not doing anything, just standing there with his hands in his coat pockets, facing the chain-link fence. I stopped walking. I watched him for a few seconds. He didn't move. I told myself he was probably just a late commuter who'd gotten confused, or maybe someone who'd had too much to drink. We got that occasionally. I walked over and told him the station was closed, that the last train had already come through. He turned and looked at me. Normal-looking guy, maybe mid-50s, wearing a dark jacket. He said something like, "I'm waiting for the 115. Then he turned back to face the fence. I told him there was no 115. There hadn't been a train on Schedule 4 in over a decade. He didn't answer. I asked him to leave the platform area, and he did, quietly, without any trouble. He just walked back through the waiting room and out the front doors. I watched him go, then did a quick check to make sure he'd actually left the building. I figured he was confused, maybe drunk. I wrote it in the incident log and moved on. Around 1:05 in the morning, I was back in the break room finishing my coffee. That's when I heard it. A low horn. Long and distant, but unmistakably a train horn. sat very still for a second. Then I heard it again, closer this time. I walked out onto the main concourse and looked toward the platforms. Platforms 1 and 2 were dark and empty. Platform 3 was dark, but through the windows facing Platform 4, I could see something I couldn't immediately process. There was a light, a single pale headlight coming up the track. I walked to the window and pressed my face against the glass. There was a train on the Platform 4 track, moving slowly. No sound now except the low grinding of wheels on rail and the faint hiss of something mechanical releasing pressure. The train was old. I mean visibly, strangely old. The carriages were dark green with no visible lettering, no route number, no destination board. The windows were dark. I couldn't see anyone inside. It stopped. It just sat there on a decommissioned track behind a locked gate, completely still, with its headlight pointing down the line. My heart was going fast. I know how that sounds. I know what the rational explanation should have been. Track misroute, some kind of maintenance run, a heritage rail event I hadn't been told about. I cycled through every excuse I could think of, but the gate was still padlocked. I could see it from where I was standing. The chain-link fence was still closed. Whatever this train was, it had come in on a track that wasn't supposed to be active, through infrastructure that wasn't supposed to be open. And someone was standing on the platform. The man in the dark jacket. He was on the other side of the fence on Platform 4, and he was walking toward the train. I don't know how he got through the gate. I watched him cross the platform. I watched him reach for the door of the first carriage. I watched it open for him. I grabbed my radio and called the station manager on duty. I was talking fast, probably not making much sense. I said there was a train on Platform 4 and a man boarding it. There was a long pause on the other end, and then the manager's voice came back flat and tired. Robert, there's no train on Platform 4. There hasn't been traffic on that line since 2009. I turned back to the window. The platform was empty. The light was gone. The track was dark. There was nothing there. I walked every inch of Platform 4 that night after the station manager came in and cut the padlock off the gate. The chain was intact. No sign it had been cut or tampered with. The platform's surface was wet from the rain. There were no footprints on it. The track had a thin layer of rust and dead leaves that hadn't been disturbed. The station manager looked at me for a long time and didn't say anything. I didn't say anything either. I quit 2 weeks later. Told my wife I just wasn't sleeping well during the day, which was true, but it wasn't the reason. Before I left, I pulled the historical records for Platform 4 from the filing cabinet in the back office. The track had last been used on March 22nd, 2009. A maintenance run, according to the log. The train was scheduled to arrive at 1:15 a.m. The late shift always seems to attract the strangest things. Our final story tonight comes from Ben Dover. This story is brought to you by Ben Dover. This happened in March of 2022. I was living alone in a rented duplex on Caldwell Street in Macon, Georgia, working as a data entry clerk for a logistics company downtown. I've been profoundly deaf since I was 4 years old, nerve damage from meningitis, so my world is pretty quiet by most people's standards. I read lips. I've done it my whole life. It's second nature to me, the way hearing is second nature to everyone else. You stop thinking about it after a while. It's just how you take in information. The duplex was fine. Basic. My neighbor on the other side of the shared wall was a guy in his 50s named Russell who kept odd hours and didn't bother me. I had a cat named Biscuit, a decent couch, and a job that paid the bills. That was March for me. Ordinary. There's a laundromat 2 blocks from Caldwell Street that I used every other Sunday. Coin-operated, fluorescent lighting, the kind of place where 3 or 4 strangers sit in plastic chairs and stare at their phones while their clothes spin. I'd been going there for almost a year. I knew the faces, regular people, same as me. The Sunday it started, there were 2 men I didn't recognize sitting near the back, both in their late 30s, maybe early 40s. Work boots, plain jackets, nothing about them stood out. I loaded my machine, sat down, and pulled out my phone. At some point, I glanced up. The 2 men were talking to each other. I wasn't trying to read them, it was just reflex. I catch words the way hearing people catch sounds. Passive, automatic. I looked back at my phone. Then my brain caught up with what my eyes had just processed. One of them had said the name of my street. I looked up again, slower this time. Careful. The man on the left was facing me at an angle, and I caught a few more words before he shifted away. Something about a side door. Something about making it look right. I told myself I'd misread. Lip reading isn't perfect. I mix up similar mouth shapes all the time, and the lighting in that laundromat was bad. I told myself I was tired, that I'd gotten maybe 5 hours of sleep, that I was reading too much into nothing. But I watched them for the next 20 minutes while I folded my laundry. And the third time the man on the left turned in my direction, I got a full, clear read on his lips. He said, "Before the end of the week." The other man nodded and said something I couldn't catch. Then the first one said, clearly, 2 syllables, a name. My name. My first and last name. I finished folding my laundry. I walked home. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I just walked and kept my breathing steady and tried to convince myself there was some other explanation. A coincidence, a misread, some other person with my name on my street. I was good at rationalizing. I'd been doing it my whole life in one way or another. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch with Biscuit on my chest and stared at the ceiling. The words kept replaying. The name of my street. The side door. Before the end of the week. By Tuesday, I had started paying attention to the things around my duplex that I normally ignored. That's when I noticed the truck. It was a gray Chevy pickup with a cracked left taillight, and it had been parked at the end of Caldwell Street since at least Monday morning. I only noticed it because it was always there. Morning, afternoon, evening, never gone. I walked past it on my way to work, and I tried to look inside without being obvious. I couldn't see anyone in the cab. That night, I texted my friend Derek, who I've known since community college. I told him what happened. He replied, "That's wild, bro. Probably nothing." Which I expected. I didn't know what I wanted him to say. Wednesday night is when things stopped feeling explainable. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I saw movement through the side window, the narrow one that looks out onto the alley between my half of the duplex and the wooden fence. Someone was standing in the alley, just standing there. I couldn't see their face from the angle, just the shape of a person, not moving. I stepped back from the window. I turned off the kitchen light. I stood in the dark for a long time. When I checked again, they were gone.
I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with my back to the wall and watched the windows.
I put Biscuit in the bedroom and closed the door. Around 2 a.m, I felt the vibration of footsteps on the porch boards. Slow, then stopping. Then the door handle moved. I watched it from across the room. The knob rotated maybe a quarter turn, then held, then rotated back. Then nothing. I was already holding my phone. I opened it and stared at it and realized I didn't know how to call 911. Not in a way that would work, not fast enough to matter. I typed an emergency text to the local dispatch number that a deaf services coordinator had given me years ago, and I just wrote, "Someone tried to open my front door. 304 Caldwell Street, South Unit. Please send someone." Then I sat there and waited. The handle moved again, once. Then I felt heavy footsteps on the porch. Not leaving, moving around the side of the house, toward the side door. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a cast iron skillet off the stove, and I moved to the hallway. I don't know what I was planning to do with it. I wasn't thinking clearly. I pressed my back against the wall between the hallway and the kitchen, and I waited, and I watched the side door. The knob turned all the way. Then the door shook, hard, once, like a shoulder had hit it. Then nothing. Lights came through the front window, red and blue, cycling. I didn't move until I felt the vibration of knocking at the front door, a specific, heavy knock pattern I recognized as police. I let them in. 2 officers. I showed them my phone, pointed at the side door, pointed at the alley. They were outside for maybe 20 minutes. When they came back in, one of them held up his notepad and wrote, "Someone was working your lock. We found tools on the porch." He wrote, "Do you know anyone who might want to harm you?" I wrote back, "I don't know. Maybe." I didn't tell them about the laundromat. I don't know why. I think I was afraid they wouldn't believe the rest of it. They never found anyone in the alley. The gray truck was gone from the end of the street by morning. The police report listed it as an attempted burglary. That's what they called it. I never corrected them. I was out of that duplex within 2 weeks. I'm in a different city now. I haven't told anyone where I moved. I had the locks changed on the new place before I even unloaded my boxes, and I covered every first floor window with blackout curtains so no one can see inside. I still go to laundromats. I don't have a choice. But I sit with my back to the wall now, and I never stop reading lips. The 2 men from the laundromat were never identified. I gave descriptions to the police, but I got the sense they thought I was confused. Maybe I misread everything. Maybe it was all just coincidence. But whoever was working that lock knew exactly which door to go to.
That's going to do it for tonight's video.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss the next one. Stay safe out there.